All right. I didn't even have my microphone on, did I? Did I? So present in the Bollinger room this afternoon is Commissioner O'Donnell, Commissioner Pinocci, Commissioner Fielder, and myself. Vice Chair Johnson is absent and excused this afternoon. We have a special guest with us today, Commissioner Fielder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that we have our long-awaited ready project manager. This is the project manager software analyst who is assisting the department modernizing its software platforms. Our Eddy system has been less than highly functional, and he's here to help us figure out the solutions for that. And we're appreciative of the legislature providing some funding so that we can do that. But Steve, would you just stand up and wave to everybody? This is Steve Spiropoulos. He's come up from Texas to enjoy our weather this time of year. And you'll be seeing him around the department. That he'll be here this week, meeting with staff and observing the operations and getting ideas, discussing ideas on how those functions and processes may be improved with our new software solutions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. All right, this is the time and place for public comment. I understand we have some public commenters or a commenter in the room. Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Daniel Zolnikov, Zolnikov, and I believe this is the first time in my life I've ever presented in front of the Public Service Commission, which seems very strange after working on so many fun issues. I'm guessing this is the right time for the format, but if not, let me know. I just wanted to kind of put a little bit of attention on a piece of legislation I passed that there's a docket under right now. So in April 25th of 2019, I passed House Bill 597, which is docket 2021-01-007. And about a month later, a chapter number was assigned to it. And I put an effective date of about 14 months after that to give a lot of time to ensure there's comments, public hearings, and working groups, and to create the best effective rules. So I had that in mind with it as well. And about 6.5 months after that, the first notice to comment occurred, which makes sense because of COVID, and there's a lot of stuff up in the air. So there's no problems or anything there. I just kind of wanted to share that so it took I gave 1.5 years through the bill's date of when it becomes law to work on it. COVID happened, so the ball got rolling again. But after January 19th, 2021, notice of comment came out. 8 months later, in September 29th, 2021, there are staff recommendations, as it should be. Comment, get recommendations. They said, okay, in October 2021, we noticed to comment for a second group of comments. And they wanted more opportunity, which it was a very, very complicated piece of legislation, and it reset a lot of rules. And about 4 months later, more staff recommendations came out, which came out this month. So there's been a process from April 25th, 2019 to now, but the new staff recommendations are additional stakeholder meetings to address two really important things, which are discovery during the utility planning process and stakeholder access to planning models. So I have no problems with further discussing it. All I'm here to do today is to ask that you kind of nip this in the bud and maybe expedite or get it taken care of, because the future upcoming integrated resource plan is coming up, which then there'll be an RFP. So the whole purpose of the law was to create a new foundation, and the rules that you guys are creating are instrumental to that foundation. But if it gets delayed too long, there's not going to be that foundation, and who knows where it could go from there. So that's all I want to do is put a little focus on it and ask you guys to put your attention on it and get it taken care of. So that's it.
In this case, I will allow it. If you're willing to take a question from the commission, Mr. Zolnick.
Always, Mr. Chairman.
I don't want to turn this into a hearing, though.
Well, thank you, President Brown. Do you have time to meet with us after the hearing's over with me?
I'm at your disposal.
Hang around. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I forgot one thing in my public comment, if I may, is I also, after serving for so long, I helped pass a lot of laws that put a lot of extra stress on the Public Service Commission. So on this one, there was funding for employees as well. And now they were for different things within the law. Some of it got taken back because it was written poorly. You can blame me or anybody within a very complicated process, but there was intent to make sure it wasn't just another weight thrown on the commission. And I acknowledge, and maybe one of the few who you can't just keep throwing new tasks without any help. So I tried to help with that as well. So just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Zolnikov. Good to see you.
Thank you, guys.
joining us today.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Any other public comment? Any online comment? Seeing none? We do have one change to the agenda today. That's going to be work session item number 3, update on commission travel. Vice Chair Johnson attended the NARUC conference held last week in Washington, DC, and I think we would all benefit from having an update from the Vice Chair on his participation in NARUC. So we'll delay or defer that matter to a future work session. All right, let's move to action item number 1, which is approval of the commission minutes for the week of February 7, 2022. Commissioner O'Donnell. Is there a second? Commissioner Pinochi is seconded. Discussion, changes to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner O'Donnell's motion to approve the minutes for the week of February 7, 2022, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries. Minutes are approved. All right, let's move into the work session portion of our meeting today. We'll take a work session item number 1. This is docket 2020.07.082, Abaco, application of Abaco Energy Services LLC to establish service rates and terms of service. We're here to consider scheduling a status conference regarding Abaco's terms of service tariffs. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This docket has a long history detailed in the staff memo that is in front of you. We have been very lenient. I should say the commission has been very lenient with the parties to put together their own proposals and eventually potentially reach a stipulation that could resolve all the issues in this very first rate case for Abaco. You'll recall that the commission previously approved the stipulation and settlement agreement that set the amount of recovery, of rate recovery for Abaco, also set most of the terms of the payment for Abaco services. What remains are all of the terms of service, line extensions, and a variety of other rules that would be established in the initial set of tariffs here for Abaco. That is the issue that, or those issues remain unsettled. It has been some time since we've officially heard from the parties in Abaco. So as detailed in the staff memorandum, our recommendation would be to schedule a status conference so that we can bring those parties together, have a discussion about the status of their negotiations. And if it looks like we need to have a hearing to resolve those remaining issues, we can talk with the parties about scheduling. Fairly straightforward, though, purely procedural at this point, nothing that requires the commission's decision on matters of substance. So our recommendation to staff would be to schedule, or rather direct staff to schedule a status conference at a date to be determined.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I will make this motion since this is in my district. I move to Have the commission issue an order setting a status conference in this matter and to assign a staff member to chair that status conference. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner O'Donnell has seconded. Discussion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, one of the things that your memo did not really point out when you say that this is a very old process on here was that this commission spent a great deal of time establishing its regulatory authority over the situation right here, which Abaco seemed to be highly reluctant to recognize the authority of this commission over that. Now that that has been solved, it doesn't seem like they're being the parties are being really anxious to get this thing resolved. My question on this conference, is it like binding arbitration? Is it just simply an informal thing to get input? At what point, if they refuse to come to a cooperative agreement, do we have the authority to simply impose something? And would that be the result of this meeting?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, I picture this status conference as something more informal. If the commission is going to have to set rates through an order, it can only do so through the process provided in MAPA. So in general, that's a hearing if the parties can't reach a stipulation. If they can reach a stipulation, MAPA allows for an informal resolution of the issues. Of course, this commission retains authority to reject the stipulation if it comes to that. So at this stage, I wouldn't look at it as any sort of binding arbitration, rather an opportunity for us to check in to get an honest assessment from the parties about the prospects of a stipulation here. And then armed with that information, the commission can make a determination about the appropriate next steps, be it additional time for the parties to negotiate or a hearing and a procedural schedule to go along with it.
Follow up.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, so my concern is that are we just simply throwing more process on this without reaching some type of conclusory end to the whole? I think I duplicated conclusory end, but at any rate, I just some finality to the whole thing. Are we approaching that, do you think?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, I think that well, I can't say exactly what the current hangup is because it has been so long since we've heard from any of the parties in an official capacity. I know from discussions with the parties to warn them of this work session that the current issue stems from that is holding them back from reaching the sort of finality that you're hoping for here is the line extension provisions of their tariffs, because Abaco is uniquely situated on land almost entirely owned by Boyne. And they also don't have a permanent easement to maintain all of their system on Boyne's property. So it's a delicate balance where these two parties very much need each other to continue to operate, but at the same time, there are some finer points that they still have not yet worked out regarding their line extension policy. Beyond that, I couldn't be more specific about what the crux of the issue is. But I will say that at this point, the commission has already resolved the financial piece of these initial rates, which is for most rate cases, the most complicated element. So I think there's still value in providing leniency to the parties to continue to negotiate this matter because of their unique situation. But if at any point the commission does feel like it is taking too long and that we need to have something scheduled to force the finality of it through a hearing, we would be, of course, happy as staff to schedule such a hearing and work through the procedure in order to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Additional discussion? I would just, if I may, Commissioner O'Donnell, just build on to Mr. Hamilton's comments and say that I think the purpose of the status conference is to acknowledge and address exactly the points that you have made, that while we've had I think, quite a bit of progress in getting this matter resolved, which I commend the parties for. I think the commission would like to see this matter finalized sooner rather than later. And I think the idea of the status conference is to do a check-in with the parties to see how close they are to finalizing this matter, steps for doing so. And if a resolution between the parties is not going to be found, that the commission will step in and take this matter to the conclusion or the finish line. So I think that's the purpose of that. Certainly, I'm supportive of it as I made the motion. Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of my motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. All right, let's move to work session item number 2. This is docket 2021.01.007, commission initiated rulemaking for utility long-term resource planning and competitive solicitations for electric resources. We're here to consider the possibility of convening a roundtable discussion. Haley?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The purpose of today's work session is outlining next steps in the House Bill 597 rulemaking docket. Last October, the Commission issued a second request for comments, with the comment period concluding in December. Staff has analyzed the comments and summarized them in the staff memo. Based on the wide-ranging comments, staff recommends the Commission direct staff to convene one or more stakeholder meetings to address specific topics and issues on which stakeholders have wide-ranging views. A detailed list of potential discussion topics is outlined in the staff memo. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Commissioner O'Donnell?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept staff's recommendation to convene stakeholder meetings on the implementation of House Bill 597.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Is there a second? Commissioner Pannocci is seconded. Discussion? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you. The memo is great, very comprehensive. Reminded me again that I need to read all of those documents again prior to this conference. And the memo does a very good job of pointing out the significant, substantial disagreements or different interpretations of House Bill 597 language. And as former Representative Zolnikov, the author of this bill, just pointed out, it said that some of the language was unfortunately imprecise on there. And I think that what he was trying to say, but was delicate enough not to say it, is that this process has taken way too long on the whole thing. I don't know if the answer is if the blame is because there's too many attorneys involved or too few involved. The process is what takes a long, long time, but I'm really happy to see that staff has identified that each one of the parties in this have serious disagreements and things that need to be cleared up, maybe through discussion, maybe through decision by this body. But I greatly am very enthusiastic about pursuing this as staff recommends, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion? I'll echo Commissioner O'Donnell's comments, and I absolutely agree with the statement. This was a very well done staff memo. I appreciated it. I'm also eager to dig into some of the substantive matters that have been brought forth by the parties for us to consider. I would also acknowledge and reinforce what Commissioner O'Donnell stated is that I have read then Representative Zolnikov's bill and may not be the most precise bill, which is making it somewhat difficult, I understand, for the commission to put together rulemaking for this bill. In addition, this is a bill of some weight and consequence, as that what we do here will have long-term impacts for energy policy, production, et cetera. So I appreciate that Representative Zolnikov, former Representative Zolnikov, but he'll always be Representative Zolnikov to us. Perhaps. I appreciate that he would like to move this along, and I think that's a fair point. Certainly, we've had this bill before us for some months now, but this is one that we want to get right, and we don't want expediency to be the enemy of, in this case, perfection, I hope. So I will support Commissioner O'Donnell's motion today. Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner O'Donnell's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. No opposition, motion carries. Thank you, Haley. Good job. All right, as noted earlier, work session item number 3, update on commission travel has been deferred. We will move now to work session item number 4. This is commission initiated. This is ARM 38.1.101, our organizational rule. We're here to discuss amendments to the organizational rule to conform to current agency structure and the needs of the agency. Mr. Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually would just as soon defer to Commissioner Fielder. I can simply tell the commission that the current organizational rule has not represented the structure or function of the agency since I've been here. The new organizational rule was written very much as a function of the strategic plan and to follow the strategic plan. And unless I'm mistaken, the primary author of the strategic plan was in fact Commissioner Fielder. And so I would prefer to defer to her expertise and history with this organizational rule.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Commissioner Fielder?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reed, for your help with this. It actually, Mr. Reed brought this to my attention that after we adopted our interim operational plan derived from the strategic plan recommendations, we put that into action for a while, several months, and Mr. Reed prompted me to take a look at our organizational rule, which should be updated so that it aligned with the strategic planning operational changes that the commission put into effect. And I wanted to hold off on that a little bit and see how the plan was working and gather more input. And that is what we've done. So today, what you have before you is a comprehensive rewrite of the existing organizational rule. The existing organizational rule was fairly scant, and it was a bit disorganized, and it did not include an organizational chart for the agency. It included a reference to one, but not the actual chart itself is not showing up in the documents. And this kind of solved a mystery to me, and that was when we go before the budget committees, all of the departments have organizational charts included in the description of their department, and our budget committee report prepared by the legislative staff said that our agency does not have an organizational chart. And I've seen some, but anyway, Mr. Reed assisted with putting together an organizational chart that's in a standard format that carries out the desires of the commission that we adopted on June 29th of 2021 and in concept. And so you'll find that in this new organizational rule. I wanted to point out a few differences between the conceptual draft that the commission adopted last June and this rule. This rule fleshes out some of the strategic planning intentions, and it also provides further detail in some areas based on discussions we've had around the department since we adopted this rule and put it into place. So the most notable changes that differ from the strategic plan are that a couple semantics changes. The position of what we had termed public policy and consumer relations coordinator is proposed to just simply be titled external affairs manager. The planned duties of that position don't change, but this term better aligns with industry standards for a position of this nature, and the core duties will remain as planned, and that is to manage the department's public policy, consumer relations, and external communications functions. And then there's some other terminology that's suggested here, and that is regarding how we refer to the commission's officers, namely our presiding officers of currently referred to as chair and vice chair. Under this rule revision, should it pass, would be referred to as president and vice president. These new terms are technically more accurate as they are more conducive to the statutory and administrative role and responsibility of this commission's presiding officers, which actually preside over more than the commission and actually have administrative responsibilities for the entire department, unlike many other commissions in the state. In fact, most other commissions simply govern, the chair governs the commission proceedings, whereas in this case, our presiding officer or chairman, as you are currently referred to, has administrative authority and responsibilities for the entire department, as does the commission itself. So I know that will be a change that will be a little awkward to get used to, but I recommend it for the sake of being more technically correct and also preventing some of the confusion that we sometimes see when we have a commissioner that's chairing a meeting that's not the actual chairman of the commission, but is the chairman of that particular meeting, and our staff and our attendees and parties are quite not sure how to address the seated chair versus the chair of the commission that may also be in the room at the same time. So this would actually take care of that conundrum once and for all. This is similar to how the Senate operates. They have several different legislators that serve as chairs at different times, but they always have one Senate president. And so there's a distinction there. The other parallel is that the Senate president has responsibility for staff and budget and things like that, managerial things in between when the body's making decisions and has specifically acted. And that's very similar to how this agency's been operating. So I do recommend that change. And then a few other changes here. I mentioned the organizational chart. It appears differently than the one we adopted, but the result is the same. The structure is the same. It's just drawn differently in a more standard format. And overall, I think this rule, the intent is to improve upon the existing rule with these revisions, with this rewrite, to add more detail concerning the role and responsibilities and authorities of the commission, individual commissioners, which really was never discussed in the previous rule, the commission officers, and what constitutes department management. That's been sort of a mystery. I hear the term management referred to often, but I've never really understood what exactly the management is. So this describes that. And also it does a little bit more work on the divisions. It explains the timing and process for selecting officers and puts into place a process for should an officer vacate a position, how that vacancy could be filled by the commission. The statute doesn't really address that detail, and this rule would allow a smooth process of an understanding of how we would go about that should that ever happen. This rule also adds the PSC help email address and the 1-800 number for consumer complaints, because one of the requirements of this rule is that it provides a means and method for how people contact the department. So in addition to our address, it also has consumer complaint information and media inquiry information. And As far as the location section of the rule, this rule actually acknowledges and recognizes the fact that commissioners are required to reside within the districts they represent, and that our in-district residents qualifies for travel calculations under MCA 2-18-501, as long as the business travel conforms with all the other applicable laws, rules, and policies, and is approved by the president, which is required by statute. And it also notes that regardless of where a commissioner resides, the official mail-in delivery should still be directed to the Helena office to avert any confusion there. And then for the legal division, there's a sentence added. I did work with our legal division administrator and our regulatory division administrator, and they did provide some helpful input into the crafting of this revision. And there's one sentence added to the legal division that's I think worth noting, and that is first one, the legal division provides competent representation to the department. This is a phrase recommended by our chief legal counsel, who advises that when measured against the Montana rules of professional conduct for attorneys, this unpacks to place high and specific requirements for attorneys with regard to their competence and to their fiduciary duty to the department and the commission as a head of the department. I think the rule is pretty clear. We tried to make it very clear and concise. So if you've read it, you probably didn't need this explanation, but I thought I'd just give a kind of an overarching overview of some of the things that are a little bit different from the strategic plan that we adopted, since the commission did adopt that. And I wanted you to be aware of any changes to that former document that we adopted. In closing, I will say that I believe this rule brings the needed clarity and structure to the high-level administrative workings associated with the very unique nature of this department, with its 5-member agency head of elected officials that represent unique geographic districts. I also believe that this rule is instructive and will be instructive not only to present and future commissioners and staff, but all who seek to understand our agency's purpose and parameters. And it provides an important foundation for the Blue Book and general guidance for the agency now and into the future. I really appreciate all the input and assistance the commissioners have provided and the staff have provided leading up to this point through the strategic planning and through the other discussions. I think this is a culmination of the past year's efforts to get some things straightened out in the agency. So I really appreciate all that help, and I humbly ask for the commission's support in adopting the rule and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Just a process question for you, Mr. Reed. So as I understand it, since this is a rule applicable to our internal operations, this doesn't need to go out for public comment or filing with the Secretary of State, or does it?
The former part of that is correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. The notion is that it is in fact, it will need to be formally on file with the Secretary of State, but it's more an announcement to the world at large and the public in general of how we are structured and run our business. So it's not open for, we don't have to require, we're not required to have public comment on the public's opinion on the matter.
All right, so presumably if we vote on this matter today and adopt it, this is immediately effective, this rule.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
All right, thank you, Mr. Reed. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For purposes of making a motion, I have a question first. Is that I strongly support probably 92%, 98%, let's say, of this, and applaud it greatly. I do have would like to have it all pass except for one small part. I don't know procedurally how to follow through on that. Do we make a motion to accept the recommendation and then vote to amend it, or vote to amend? But that's the proper way. Then I would make a motion to accept the this proposed rule change that Commissioner Fielder has just announced on here. Thank you.
Can I ask you as a courtesy to withdraw that motion, I'd like to have Commissioner Fielder have the honors for making that
Oh,
motion. since she did the
but of
bulk
course, no problem. I
Thank you, Commissioner
withdrawn.
O'Donnell.
Yes.
Commissioner Fielder, would you like to make the motion?
If only that would work when he makes his motion too. That'd be great. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell for withdrawing. I appreciate that. So, Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission adopt the revision to administrative rules of the Administrative Rules of Montana 38.1.101, the Department of Public Service Regulation Organizational Rule. This rule revision would replace the existing rule that's on file now, Mr. Chairman.
I will second that motion. Discussion. This would be the appropriate time to bring an amendment if you'd like, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. Yeah, my concern, it's certainly the use of the term president that Commissioner Fielder and I have discussed at some length. I respect all of the thought that went into this and deeply respect the really in-depth experience, corporate experience of Commissioner Fielder and also Mr. Reed with his extensive international experience with various different organizations. I can see that reflected here, a very, very comprehensive and an incredibly great foundation for this agency. I feel uncomfortable with the word president in that in many organizations, the president has very specific powers that are not shared by other members of the board. In no other agency in the state of Montana has 5 heads of the agency, with one person as enumerated multiple occasions by our current chairman as the chairman's job is to be the spokesman for representation, the feeling of the commissioners. And it's just a sense that I have that the term chairman better reflects that relationship than president. And it's something, if the board decides to go with president, I can certainly live with that. I think that it conveys our unique situation a lot more favorably to call it to retain chairman, vice chairman, and I would move to amend. I guess, is that the proper procedure? Okay, to retain chairman, vice chairman in place of president, vice president.
Very good. As a courtesy to you, Commissioner O'Donnell, I'm going to second your motion with the understanding I probably won't support it.
Sure.
But I think this is a discussion worth having. So we have a motion to amend that has been moved and seconded. Discussion, Commissioner Fielder.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the thoughtfulness of Commissioner O'Donnell in reviewing the entire rule, and I'm pleased that this is the only red flag that he found, because Commissioner O'Donnell's very good at finding red flags in documents. So thank you for your scrutiny of the work, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, let me correct. It's not a red flag. It's not an error. Just call it a maroon flag.
Okay.
Perhaps, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I understand there's a comfort level with the terminology, and there's tradition with it too. As I've been working on the strategic plan and been tasked with leading that effort and with the Blue Book revisions, and then this rule really has a direct nexus to both of those, which is why I got involved in this rule. The thought process that I try to keep at the forefront of things is what's good and sound for the institution now and into the future, regardless of the people and positions that are here now. And so the reason I recommend this change really doesn't have anything to do with the current situation. It's more of a structural recommendation to be a little bit more accurate in terms of recognizing the responsibility that the presiding officer, as it's termed in statute, that the presiding officer of the department has is significant and it's important. And I think it's important that the commissioners and the staff recognize that, because there has to be order. And in order for there to be order, there has to be somebody in charge. And the presiding officer of the commission has statutory responsibilities that go well above what a typical committee chairman would have. And I really appreciate you for taking those responsibilities on, for one thing. But I think it's important to recognize that formally through the words that we use. And if Commissioner O'Donnell's motion passes, it's not by any means the end of the world. And I don't think it's going to change much right now. But the reason I'm asking for support, or I guess opposition to the motion, and to move on with the terminology, is because it will help us avert some confusion and some awkwardness in our proceedings. And I do think it's terminology is better in alignment with the responsibilities and authorities of a department presiding officer, which is akin to a director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. And I quite agree with Commissioner Fielder's reasoning, and that I see that it would have some benefits to it. It's just that I just wanted to say that I don't feel that the reasons are compelling enough, although they are real. The awkwardness of the chairman of the commission calling in or participating in a session when another commissioner is the acting chairman of that thing. I understand the awkwardness, but I don't feel that that's just really compelling enough to make what I consider to be changing the term from chairman to president, I think is a significant expansion or protraction of the elevation, I guess might be a better word, of the role of the presiding officer right here. I'd rather that the chairman be regarded as one of us and a spokesman for us, rather than somebody in charge of us, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion? Commissioner Panoche.
Listening to all this carefully, I'm going to support Jennifer Fielder, Commissioner Fielder's motion, but I will be watchful. And if there is confusion or problems, I'd be willing to revisit this issue, but willing to give it a try. I believe some more important issues in front of us is Montana has to evolve with the changes that are in front of us. And I want to let everyone know that railroad safety, for instance, is a much greater concern, I think, than it was in the past, because railroad service has increased. My district very clearly reached out to me explaining concerns and safety issues, and they were correct before the derailment. And they're certainly correct that my district has more railroad deaths than all other districts combined. Amtrak has just announced the new locomotive, which is more powerful and faster, which will be implemented in Montana in the next few days. And I don't think our rail service specifications are really where they should be. So I think being more professional and understanding that our needs are changing in Montana, not only in rail service, but pipeline. A few years ago, we had no Bakken oil field. Now we do. They're talking about putting an oil pipeline in, which I reminded them I don't really oversee, but perhaps a legislator is going to change that. And I believe a legislature is going to put more responsibility on rail safety. So I think the changes that Commissioner Fielder is asking for will help meet a higher level professionalism under a time when we're going to see some changes in the next legislative session. So I fully support these changes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Panoche. Additional discussion? I appreciate your comments, Commissioner O'Donnell. I think they have substance and are meritorious. I'm mindful of serving as the current chairman. I am mindful of the fact that I am your equal, and not in any way anything but your equal. I don't really think that that changes whoever sits in the president's or chairman's chair as a result of the actions that we may take today. I realize there will be some confusion should we change the title from chairman to president. Certainly when we appear before legislative committees in the coming months, there will be some discussion about chairman versus president. The reason that I support what Commissioner Fielder is proposing in terms of the title change for the position is because I do think it aligns more with Robert's Rules of Order and the conduct of meetings. Essentially, the president does run meetings. And so I think the way we conduct our business sessions is generally done under the guise of Robert's Rules of Order. And so I think it will have the benefit in that way. I do give a tip of the cap to the history of the Montana Public Service Commission that this position has been called the chairman's or chairwoman's position since its inception. And so we are deviating a bit from the historical aspect of the operation of the Department of Public Service Regulation. But substantively, I think what having the title change to president makes sense for organizational reasons. So I will be opposing your motion in the most gentle way that I possibly can, because I do appreciate your comments and I do think they need to be said today. And so I do appreciate your raising that. Additional discussion. Mr. O'Donnell.
And I respectfully, very respectfully forgive you.
You are a magnanimous man, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion. All right, so all those in favor of Commissioner O'Donnell's motion, I would say to segregate and not approve of that portion of the underlying motion to change the title of the chairmanship to president and vice president, signify by saying aye. So by saying aye, you'll be supporting Commissioner O'Donnell's motion.
Aye.
Those in favor?
Aye.
All right, all those opposed signify by saying no.
No.
No. Motion fails 3-1. All right, back to discussion on to the underlying motion, which was to adopt the rules. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Certainly, this commission has been the subject of very poor public image in the past, and I think that that is derived very significantly from our lack of organization of internal structure and who's in charge and whatever. And so I think that this plan right here, involved in all the other strategic planning that's been done, goes a long way to reestablishing the business profile, professional profile, and reputation of this commission. I applaud the work of Commissioner Fielder and all those who were also involved very strongly, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Additional discussion? I'll echo the comments of Commissioner O'Donnell. This is really quality work that has been done primarily with the lead of Commissioner Fielder, but also with the help of regulatory and
Mhm.
legislative staff and other staff here at the Montana Public Service Commission. I'm very pleased that we're discussing this topic today and bringing forth these changes. I think it's a reflection of how much progress has been made in the last year on reorganizing the agency, providing better direction up and down the agency, better defining duties. These are all things that were identified during our audit in 2021. I see this as another piece of the commission redressing the findings of the, last year's audit. I really believe we have brought this agency to a point where we sought to get, which all of us agreed to, that we would try to make this the model agency for the state of Montana. Working on our internal processes such as we are is another step in reaching that goal. So I think that this is a really good step and needed to be done. Again, I commend Commissioner Fielder for her work on this. Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Commissioner Fielder's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Seeing no opposition, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. All right, work session on item number 5. This is commission initiated. We're going to have a litigation status update. We'll have a discussion and to get an update on currently pending legislation and to discuss litigation strategy for the agency. The next portion of our meeting, or the upcoming portion of our meeting, will be closed to the public. With that said, I will comply with the right to know provisions of the Montana Constitution by saying the presiding officer of any meeting may close the meeting during the time discussion relates to a matter of litigation and or litigation strategy, and the presiding officer, in this case myself, the president, determines the need to protect agency litigation, decision-making and discussion exceeds the merits of public disclosure. The discussion in the upcoming closed session will involve discussions and decision-making related to ongoing litigation in which the agency is involved as a party. Accordingly, as the presiding officer of this meeting, I have determined that the conversation on litigation decision-making exceeds the merits of public disclosure. Therefore, I am closing the next portion of the meeting. I will say that at the conclusion of the closed litigation session, we will adjourn today's business meeting. But before we do that, I would let the public know that the next commission business meeting will not be next Tuesday. It will be on Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. So we'll push back a couple days. And with that said, let's move into closed session.